Hi, everyone. Before we get into it, I think everyone that signed up today, whether you're listening live, you're listening to us on demand, the session here is called Scaling Smart. We're going to be talking all about how to get your billing and compliance growth ready. It comes at a perfect time because I think today or yesterday is the first day of fall. I know everyone on here is probably in the midst of locking in your Q4 plans, figuring out what you're going to be doing in 2026, right? So we hope that you can take at least 1 to 2 tips from today's session and put that into some of your planning that you're probably very heads down focused on nowadays. So that's a little bit about what to expect. Let's talk about who you're going to hear from today. I'm going to ask everyone to share their name, what their role is, and then given that we're now officially in fall, I thought it'd be fun to share maybe your favorite fall activity. So Joe, I'm going to pick on you. Maybe you go first, and then we can go through the line here.
Sure. So Joe Stanton, president at TaxCloud. Been here for about 2.5 years. We do sales tax automation for small to mid-sized businesses who are looking for peace of mind around that topic. My favorite fall, well, I wore my flannel today that Michael pointed out earlier for fall, and my favorite activity, I guess, is golf, and it's because I coach summer baseball, so I've coached my son's baseball team for 10 years or so straight. And so summer's like really busy and it's hot and humid here in Minnesota, and baseball season ends, it's fall, and then we get the opportunity to go play some golf.
Nice. Love it. Lydia, do you want to go next?
Sure. Lydia Stone here. I'm the Vice President of Finance and Chief Accounting Officer for ChargeBee. Have been for almost 4 years, managing the billings and accounting finance operations. My favorite activity, whether it's fall, spring, summer, winter, all the same, we love fishing. Myself and my son especially, we go all over the country, the world, to go fishing. Our most notable accomplishment is a shark.
Wow.
But he got lucky, we let him go. So, but not all fish get that lucky. We do also cookouts after fishing.
Love that. And then Michael, want to go round us out?
Sure. So Michael Krantz, head of partnerships here at Go Cardless. We're a global payments company. So we focus really in bank payments. So in the US, you'd know that as ACH, have over 100,000 customers. I've been with the company for a little over 6 years, been in partnerships coming up on 15 years. And my favorite fall activity is probably new this year. So I have a 7-month-old. And she's just now sleeping through the night. So once 7 o'clock comes, I would say, my wife and I will cook, we'll play a game of pool. The winner gets to pick the movie. Very wholesome stuff this fall.
Love that. Well, cool. Well, hopefully everyone listening, you can tell we've got the true experts here today. I think this is an awesome panel. So really excited to hear what all of you are going to say. Before we get into it, just to give everyone a sense of what we're going to be covering. We're going to kick things off and kind of set the scene to talk about some of the scaling pains we often see SaaS businesses run into as you're growing. Then we'll take that into some solutions, talk about how you can actually solve that. Then we're going to have some fun at the end, do some rapid fire lessons. We'll answer your questions. So without further ado, we're going to jump into the content, talk about the scaling pains, and Lydia, we're going to have you go first.
So in my seat here in ChargeBee, being one of the biggest billings solutions out there, we talk to leaders, finance leaders across the world. So when we talk to them, there are a few themes that comes up again and again when it comes to billings challenges. So I've kind of summarized them into 3 key areas. One is operational inefficiency. So, a lot of times people say, how hard can billings be? Well, if you have the right systems, it doesn't have to be hard, but a lot of times it does gets hard when the system is not behaving the exact way that you think it should behaving, or it's pure manual. To manage a growing business in a manual spreadsheet or in a rigid system in this evolving world does not help with efficiency and speed. So I find teams spending hours reconciling spreadsheets, chasing down errors, stitching together many spreadsheets to just get through month-end close instead of focusing on insights and doing things that will help business grow. We're constantly stuck in cleanup mode. So that is, I think, the number one pain in startup, scaling up, growing companies. When companies growing faster than their infrastructure, this tends to be something that always drags them on a day-to-day basis. So the second thing is what we find is that growing companies, especially, they desire pricing flexibility. To be able to, now many people say, well, why does that have anything to do, how does that have anything to do with billings and the billing system? So in a especially SaaS and technical world, pricing has everything to do with billings. To have your billing system to be able to price flexibly and to bill out correctly to your customers and have that data feedback to you to collect properly based on that information is really, really important. So that pricing flexibility, lack of, a lot of times hinders the business to grow the direction they want to go. If they want to test, for example, usage-based or value-based pricing, rigid systems or manual spreadsheets, make it incredibly hard to adapt to this new pricing strategy. And also harder to find out whether it worked because data flows extremely hard to track manually. So that brings me to the third pain point that we hear all the time, which is data visibility. With revenue data scattered across, so your billings data is your revenue data or akin to your revenue data. With revenue data scattered across your different systems, it's almost impossible to get real-time insight into your MRR, your churn, or your cash flow. So reporting becomes painful and reactive activity, and leadership ends up flying blind, sometimes having to make quick decisions without having all the information needed. All of these issues are is painful on its own, but together they lead to very serious outcomes, which is companies' growth is growing pain. So finance team ends up a lot of times enduring the pain and trying to make the best of this kind of environment and still having to close the books, still having to report out numbers and giving insights, making decisions, or help business leader making decisions. So that's the gap that this team here, try to address.
Awesome. Thanks, Lydia. Yeah, I know even firsthand, I've seen the pains of homegrown billing and the hours it also takes, engineering teams to maintain as well. Michael, I know you were sharing some stories yesterday. Anything you'd add here from your experience or any comments on your side?
Yeah, I think Lydia, the one that thanks, Christina. Lydia, the one that jumps out to me really is under that operational inefficiency, specifically around the number of hours that companies can potentially spend doing manual reconciliation. So, the theme, one of the themes of this webinar is growth, and you can grow your business a number of ways. You can, hire more people. You can get more marketing budget. You can invest in different areas, but there is one finite thing always for any business, and that is time, right? And for something like reconciliation, which is a necessary thing, if you're spending hours doing manual reconciliation, not only we see this all the time, not only is your team spending the 10 hours a week, let's say, doing that versus doing other things that help them grow the business, taking under strategic initiatives or what have you. They're doing this laborious thing, but they also are doing it manually, which introduces risk, right? You fat finger a number, you don't get all the data right. So it's kind of inhibiting growth because you're spending time on things that could be automated, but you're also potentially exposing yourself to risk in a way that could either leave you not compliant, opening up to liability or, things of that nature. So we see plenty of companies who automate that process. They save the time and they ultimately have growth with a lot less headaches.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great call out. Talking about headaches too, maybe we can jump into the next pain.
How come when I'm talking, you mention headaches? So here's some headaches for you, right? I think when you're thinking about how payments affect growth, there's probably two key parts. And one is you have an inflexible payment system. And that breaks down, in my opinion, to two different things. One is a narrow set of payment options. And what I mean by that is basically payers have a way they prefer to pay. In my personal life, let's say, I'm walking down the street and I see a corner store and I want to get a soda or a bag of chips, whatever. I typically carry card in my wallet, no cash. If that store, that little shop has a sign that says cash only, I'm not going in there, right? So they have a very narrow set of payment options that doesn't cater to their payers. So one thing that businesses really want to avoid is limiting themselves by having that narrow payment option. And they want to look at, not just offering credit cards. Maybe they want to have Apple Pay. Maybe they want to collect via ACH, right? You have to pick something that will cater to your payers, but also you have to factor in what will fit for your business. So for those different payment methods, what are the costs associated with them? Both the fees and then the other costs. If you're looking at things like cash flow, how soon do you get paid, right? You want to get paid in a day or two later, so you're doing credit cards or ACH, or for whatever reason, maybe it's not that important. So you say, sure, send us a check, and you're now waiting 2 weeks, right? And then you're back into the whole manual reconciliation problem. Or, the third part is, in addition to cost and cash flow, payment failures, right? Payments can fail. They do fail. And different payment types have different failure rates. So credit card, for example, depending on the vertical you're in, they can fail 5, 10, 15% of the time. When that happens, you are not getting paid. But in addition to not getting paid, you have to take time from your team to go and try to recoup and recollect those payments. So you want to pick something that maybe has a lower failure rate. Just to promote ACH a bit here, out of the box, it's below 3%. So at least 2 to 3x lower than a credit card. But you want to have a blend, right? You don't want to only offer ACH, because then you're back in a position of having too narrow of a payment option. So that's kind of inflexible payment systems. The next one is touching on compliance and security risks. So Go Cardless, we do bank payments. I'm going to focus on the bank part of it. So from a compliance perspective, you want to make sure that you are following the rules as set out by the overarching association that oversees bank payments in the US. That's called NACHA, the National Automated Clearinghouse Association. And they have some very explicit rules and regulations of what you have to do if you are going to collect an ACH payment. Now, if you're doing this on your own, you're going to probably be doing a manual batch upload on a daily basis. That's one part, which is very manual. But more from the compliance side of things, you have to make sure that when you're presenting the option to a payer to pay via ACH, that they are getting the proper notifications, that they're fully aware of what they're signing up for, the terms, conditions, et cetera. And there's very explicit statement that you have to present. So you can either try to do that on your own and potentially be on the hook if it's not completely compliant, or you can find someone out there who's an expert in that space to make sure that, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and that you're insulated. The second one there is more around the security risks. I know I don't want anyone having my bank account number, my routing number. That is a very scary thought. So you want to make sure that you're not storing this data as a company, that you want to use the equivalent of a credit card token, or what we call an authorization. So it's a very unique code that when payments being pulled, it's using that. It's not using the account number, routing number, and exposing you to risk. So obviously you can imagine what happens when you're not compliant, whether it's fines, fees, or security risks. The bank account data gets out there. We saw what happened in years past with the likes of Target. You can take a reputational hit. When you have inflexible payment systems, when you're not compliant, when you're exposed to security risks, you then introduce the potential for revenue leakage. And that can be through your existing customer base, or preventative in reducing your growth through new customer acquisition.
Awesome. Love it. Joe, I know you were also sharing some experience here. What would you want to add to this?
Oh yeah, man. Both Lydia and Michael's slides hit home personally for me. At TaxCloud, just quick little history. TaxCloud's been around for 12 or 13 years actually, and was acquired by a private equity company in 2022. And so I came to TaxCloud through the relationship with the private equity company. And when I got here, we had just rolled out new pricing plans, an annual option, but we had a homegrown system. So there was no subscription engine. Each time a customer bought something, we hard coded it in the database. Some of it was in arrears, some of it was not. As you can imagine, it was like a huge mess. We didn't know what plan people were on. So we didn't even know what plan our customers were on. If we were billing all of our customers, so you're talking about revenue leakage, it's like we ended up, surprise, we weren't. So we actually found revenue, which was great. We didn't know if it was the right amount. Surprise, not all of them were the amounts that we thought they would be. And so we had very little audit trail. And so on top of that, so we also pull funds for tax filings. And so that's mostly ACH, as Michael's talking about here. And again, we had a homegrown system with a regional bank, lived on a virtual machine that like one person had access to. And so you can imagine like the things that Michael's talking about here around the security risks and the compliance risks. So we had all that going on. And so for like, so I always look back and I go like, instead of my first 3 months being at TaxCloud being like, let's go focus on growing the company, which is part of what we're talking about here, right? The limiting growth. We spent the first few months after the acquisition solidifying our billing system and our tax funding system, instead of just being like, let's go grow the company. But like, I'm really glad we did. And full disclosure, we're both ChargeBee and GoCardless customers. They were part of how we solved the problem.
Love it. Great story, Joe. Love the full circle here as well. And then I know you've got some opinions to share to kind of round out the story here.
So I'm gonna actually lead with some numbers that are not on here that I'm gonna share with you from a recent SaaS CFO survey. So they did a survey of 600 SaaS businesses, and the results were pretty interesting, and I think highlight this whole idea of compliance as an afterthought. So of the 600 business, 30% of the CFOs that were surveyed don't remit sales tax. So almost a third of all the SaaS businesses, and these aren't just like really small SaaS businesses. These are also businesses, like 1 to 10 million, which was 45% of SaaS businesses that are 1 to 10 million don't remit sales tax. And then even of the ones that do, so it was like, okay, cool. So a number of people are not remitting their sales tax and not, a lot of them probably not in compliance with the states. Of those that are, 20% are using spreadsheets, which I think, both Lydia and Michael talked about, like a really painful, time-consuming way to do it. And so, I mean, I personally was shocked when I read those numbers, and that survey just came out last week. And so I was like, oh, I knew compliance could be an afterthought, but as we look at some of these things on the screen, it's like a lot of times we get brought in TaxCloud at the moment of like an investment. So like a SaaS company is like goes and takes venture capital, or they're going to get acquired or a piece of them by private equity, and we get brought in because it's like, okay, we need to assess where you're at with your compliance, and so. It's a lot of risk to wait. So as we think about, it's like waiting or doing something about it right now. It just creates a lot of risk for the business. And the two things that we typically hear from businesses when they do come to us is, it's like, well, we didn't think it mattered yet, right? And they're like, we're small. We didn't think it really mattered, or we just don't have the resources to spend time figuring it out. We're focused over here. We don't have the time. And I think, when we look at the whole picture and this equal signs here is just like, what they don't realize is that the penalties and the interest are adding up every single day. Like the further and further you get out of compliance, and your business is growing and you're out of compliance, like penalties and interest, especially in sales tax, are basically just accumulating silently for you. And the states will eventually come for it, and so, so when we get to the next section, we talk about recommendations, but it's like, there's some, some pretty simple solutions to just like hook up and at least start monitoring and understanding where your exposure is. And it doesn't have to be spreadsheets, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. I know Lydia, on the finance side, I'm sure you've got a couple of stories on your side on the sales tax side. Anything that you'd share from your past experience or anything to add to the story?
Yes, exactly to Joe's point. Back in 2020, here in ChargeBee, we acquired a couple companies. So both of them are not that big, but again, they're in the stage where, they're too big to not worry about compliance, but in a way they're also too fast growth to worry about it because they felt like they had bigger fish to fry. So when we came to the picture wanting to buy their tools, their product, we quickly realized that the company hasn't done any sales tax registration or withholding or reporting or any of the compliance matters. So, and going back how many years, right? So we quickly realized we had a problem at hand. So that to be able to get to a acceptable agreement from both buyer and seller perspective, the deal was a bit delayed for us to come up with a decision there. Eventually, we settled with the position that the seller has to put aside the buyer. So the seller has to put a portion of the buyer's funds, the proceeds, to a contingency fund so that all the states where they were operating, where this compliance matters were not in compliant, were handled. And then so that impacted the sellers in that perspective when they were trying to sell a company that was not compliant. So then we took over. My team then say, okay, now what do we do? We have a bunch of transactions and customers in those two companies that we now inherited that were out of compliant. So we need to go fix it. So fixing it without having the data in the system was super hard because they were in multiple states, multiple cities, multiple local jurisdictions that had rates that are all different from each other. On top of that, there was rates that changed for many of the individual jurisdictions over the few years that they were in business. So how do you go back and try to be compliant in every single area? So it took almost a year for my team to go back and fix every jurisdiction and then figure out how much we owe each state, each city, each jurisdiction, and go to the city, go to the state and say, hey, we're sorry. Here is, something. Some of them are more forgiving. Some of them required a lot more back and forth to get it done. So the lessons learned. So I love tax guys because they can fix these issues. They're a lot more forward thinking, where they say, hey, you don't know how complicated doing sales tax in the U.S. is like dealing with 52 countries at least. Right, because every state is different, and within the states, the complexity is just incredible, and plus they change all the time. So the manual amount of work is just impossible to manage. And the funny thing is to me is that even though a business may be very small, if you're already in a few states, that's already big for compliance. Like, so a lot of time we hear the same thing. We're like, oh, we're pretty small. We're not at that point of complexity yet from the business perspective, but do know that the complexity of compliance actually leads the business size. So painful lessons learned, but to Joe's point, we, finding the solutions, hence the three of us talking here, because, having your billing system that handles your billings correctly and your tax correctly and the payment correctly, that solves 90% of the pain on your revenue operations.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Really great lessons. I think too, I'd even just plus one. I think one thing to add to Joe's comments around SaaS is that remote employees is a big part too. We hear that can create a lot of nexus, right? Because as a SaaS business, I know a lot of us are kind of remote in different states, which can also trigger some of that nexus. So we'll talk more about that in just a few, but I love hearing these firsthand stories. And Lydia, like you said, the connectivity around all three of these is really great. Joe, anything you want to kind of leave us with to kind of wrap up here before we go into the next section?
I think Lydia just did it, right? I just had to piggyback on that. I would just be like, investing earlier in your engine, right? So if you're investing earlier in this revenue engine, like Lydia was just talking about, you'll unlock growth faster, you're gonna capture revenue faster, you're gonna have peace of mind, right? Like peace of mind for the future and for the things that are gonna happen with your business.
Oh, that's great. Well, cool. I know we've talked a little bit about the pains, but the goal of today is also, hopefully if you're listening, you can relate. So let's talk a little bit about how we can actually solve some of those pains, and we'll break it down by each area. Lydia, I'll hand it over to you to kick us off in the first part, talk a little bit about modernizing your billing.
Thank you. So I start by just telling you a little bit about what ChargeBee does. So ChargeBee is a SaaS-based billings automation tool. From the moment the contract is signed to getting billed, to tax being calculated correctly in your bills, to enable your customers to pay you through the payment gateways or many other payment methods that the customer would prefer, or GoCardless being one of the best options for our customers to pay us as well. So we offer this seamless integration from contracting to billings to compliance to collections to revenue recognition at the back end, and then integrate all of that to your accounting system, that being your QuickBooks and NetSuite, and so on and so forth. And then your reporting out of for your ARR, MRR, your churn data, and so on and so forth. So we offer this automated all-in-one solution for major part of your revenue and finance operations, basically. So then going into a little bit more details on some of the key features, I would say the billings and invoicing is always the foundation, the number one source of pain for finance teams if it's not done in an automated way. So most companies start out with spreadsheets and simple invoicing tools. But as volume grow, errors creeps in, as we talked about, reconciliation piles in, and month-end close gets delayed. So I think one of the key measures that finance team gets measured on is how many days do you take it to close the books. Was in a small startup before, and having gone through that process, I always feel like proud if I could say I can close the books within 5 days, but most times I can't. And because of these exact pain. So in ChargeBee, here I'm working for ChargeBee, using ChargeBee's product along with Tax Cloud and GoCardless, our entire process end to end is automated. Subscriptions get signed up automatically, renews automatically. If proration needs to be handled for early renewals, for example, is handled automatically. Credits and refunds applied automatically, and then multi-currency, multi-entity, all handled automatically in our systems. So we have about 4,600 customers in most of the countries in this world. Having end-to-end billings system is really very key for currently here in ChargeBee. We're able to close our books within 5 days. This is one critical area that contributed to that. So the second thing I would touch on is the one thing that I talked about that was a pain. So on the flip side is when you have the right system, what benefit you will gain, which is the flexible pricing and monetization strategy. So we actually done a study earlier this year of companies like ChatGPT, for example. ChatGPT changed their pricing strategy 2,300 times within a year. So what system do they use to bill their customers to be so flexibly handling their pricing strategy changes, right? Because as soon as that changes, your sales team has to change, your billings, all the back end practices changes. And that is, what ChargeBee does. So we offer a very flexible pricing cataloging part of our module of our systems. So about 2 years ago, we went to a mid-sized company where they have a very complicated pricing catalog in their homegrown billing system. So their pricing catalog had 984 items. After we implemented our system, they were down to 17 without losing any efficient way to sell, because 984 items was confusing their sales team quite a bit. So instead we built this layered structure for them where their sales team is more clear on what to sell, and the billings process is more streamlined. So there's a lot, not to mention the back end data is all more clear, and that it's easier to report out as well. So having the right system, having the right automation really unblocks not just your finance team, really the entire business itself. It is a very powerful growth lever that you can use. Now, these days, one of the hottest topic in the pricing world for SaaS companies is also usage based. Not many systems can do that, right? So not only think about how do I bill usage, but also know where do I put a usage on, which part of the usage could be the most, pricing worthy for my customers. Not having the data will not enable you to make those decisions. And then that brings me to the next thing, which is having the right data. Now, data will help you make decisions, we all know, but the right systems will give you the right data on a real-time basis, which is, many of the automated systems out there can do, which includes Chargebee. So I want to also just kind of touch on the importance of having an integrated payment and collection solution as part of the system. So when it's set up right, billings will equal your collections. The moment the billings action is taken, you push the button, bills goes. It goes automatically, or you don't need to push the button because you can schedule recurring billings to go out at the time it needs to go out. And then collections immediately starts. The collection engine starts at, let's say, day 30 or 2 weeks before day 30. Our reminders going out. Our credit cards being looked at to be charged. Our second reminders going out, right? So those collection activities can happen in real time. So, I would say in Chargebee, this is actually one of the companies now for the right reasons because we own the product and we have partners like these folks that are working with us, like TaxCloud and GoCardless. So we have our automated collections process and system set up such that 90% our collections are done automatically. So within 60 days, 90% of cash is in the door. So with the 10%, our system will highlight the reasons and the jurisdictions, the currencies, the issues. If there's an open ticket because the customer had a technical issue, all that colors is in front of you so you know where to take that customer from a collection perspective. So also to say that, it's never too early to think about the right process and the right system that can empower your process.
I just wanted to chime in on this because we, GoCardless and Chargebee, we have about close to 1,000 joint customers, and I get a lot of feedback on Chargebee specifically. And if I'm just looking at this list, and you're going to get, if you're a startup or a scale up, you may say, well, there's a cost associated with Chargebee, et cetera. I could not imagine doing all these things in a non-automated way with disparate systems, whether it's homegrown or 5 different platforms. A business would have to spend 90% of their time doing things that aren't related to their business. And this is just kind of like a one-stop shop, and then you'll have all the connections into TaxCloud or GoCardless or QuickBooks and NetSuite. Like, it's dramatic, the changes that businesses who start using Chargebee go through, and we hear that just feedback. We're not even asking for it, and they'll be glowing about it. So I just wanted to emphasize that point.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, we lived it. I can't tell you how many meetings, and some of the TaxCloud people who will watch this will also remember this. How many meetings we had where we went line by line in a spreadsheet of new customers and what they bought, and could we fit them into our homegrown system so that we could bring the revenue into the business. Hours of meetings.
Great stories here too. Again, kind of full circle across the solution. I think we'll jump into, I think we were talking about payment collection. So I think nice transition into the payment side. Michael, if you want to run us through this one.
Yeah. So no headaches on this slide. This is how to do things in a way that'll remove the headaches, right? So really 4 parts to modernizing your payments. And we touched on the negative effects maybe 20 minutes ago on the previous slides. The first one there's reducing failed payments, right? So when a payment fails, you can retry it manually. You can call the customer. You can have that frictional touch point that you're trying to avoid. Two ways to address this. One, pick a payment method that has a low failure rate so that does not happen that often. But then also pick a solution that has a smart retry option. So, a little self-selling here with GoCardless. We have a proprietary smart retry solution It's uses machine learning with 35 some odd different metrics. How much was the payment for? When was it attempted to be collected? Where was it attempted, etc. And it picks the optimal retry date, right? So instead of a shot in the dark, we're saying what is the highest likelihood that if we retry this payment, it will be successful? And that has a success rate of about 70%. So I mentioned earlier, ACH fails around 3% of the time. If you're capturing 70% of those failed payments, that gets you down to about 0.5 or 0.6% failure rate, which is, incredibly good for businesses. And if you compare it to a card, which I mentioned before is 5 or 10%, that can really make a big difference to your business. The next part is having that approach of catering to your payer's preference. How do they want to pay? Make those payment options available to them. Don't have 20 different options, but have the ones out there that you think the majority of your base would want to pay with. And then also make sure you have the ones that fit your business's needs. Again, those 3 points were cost, cash flow, and payment failures. And you can take different strategies. If you want to guide someone to a particular payment method, maybe at checkout, you stack rank it, right? You put the one you want them to use first. Maybe you incentivize them or penalize them if they use a particular payment method. Third point there is really, you want to have that automated reconciliation. I think Lydia hit it home on the last slide where automation is the key. And if you can do that with something like reconciliation, which is a necessary thing, it's not just this back office thing that happens. There's smart ways to do it and picking the right solutions that can help you automate that. And then in the case of Go Cardless and ChargeBee, the source of truth is ChargeBee. You're not leaving ChargeBee to go somewhere else. Everything happens through the payment life cycle is showing up in ChargeBee. And then when it's done, it's in there, right? Whether it's a payment failed, payment successful, or in process. And then one more little tidbit, especially for the finance folks out there, is if you're using Payment Gateway, like a Go Cardless, there will be fees, right? How are those fees collected? Are they taken for each transaction, where then that kind of messes up reconciliation? So you're charged $100, but it's missing 50 cents because of the payment gateway, or is it done in arrears? So Go Cardless does in arrears, which just makes for a nice clean reconciliation. And then the last piece is, make sure that you're picking a payment gateway or a payment provider that it cares about protecting not only your data, but the data of your customers, ensuring that they're compliant with whatever regulatory body based on the payment method that they need to be, and almost you're offboarding it to an expert in the field. You don't want to go and learn all the nuances of compliance for ACH. That doesn't sound like so much fun to most people. Let the experts take care of it and insulate your business. So that's just a quick one there on payments.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. And then Joe, want to kind of round us out with some tips around the compliance side?
Sure. So we have a mantra on our product and engineering teams at TaxCloud, and that is think big, start small. And as for me, and I've done this at a lot of different companies, for me, it's almost everything in business, including your revenue engine and including compliance. And I think typically I would say businesses, especially like smaller SaaS companies, thinking big isn't the difficult part, right? Like we have these visions of like, we're doing this next year, we're growing this much, we're going international, we're doing all these things. It's starting small, right? And I think the key word there, and this is for like any project or anything, is just starting and starting early if you can, but like just get started. And I think compliance is the same way. And so if you look like at that first, bullet point there, it's like starting small with sales tax compliance is just understanding your nexus and where you stand within the states and the jurisdictions and everything and what your exposure is. And so just at least hooking your system up to something, to a system like a TaxCloud that can monitor it for you is just like a very easy way for you to mitigate your risk and start to understand. And so when we think about it, it's like, oh, this big thing, I got all these states, I'm in these states, I have these remote employees and I have all this stuff. It's like, no, like, let's chunk this down, start small, like just hook it up and start monitoring. And, and so like, as you look at these other bullet points, it's like, once you get hooked up, it's like, and you decide, and you're in that decision point of like, who are you hook up? It's like, pick a partner who makes it really easy, right? It should be, You should mostly have like no code integrations, or should be a very easy API sort of integration. It hopefully, like in the case of here, it's like TaxCloud hooks right into ChargeBee, right? Like, so you can just go and hook up your integration to it. So it should be really easy. The third point here is like, make sure you pick a partner that is actually there for you and is going to answer your questions. So it's like, it's one thing, I know on here it says, it's one thing to have like great software and everything be accurate. But remember the first thing that we heard from SaaS people was like, well, I just didn't know, or I didn't understand whether I was, had anything going on here, or I needed this remit sales tax. And it's like, make sure you pick a partner where there's people who pick up the phone, who answer your emails, who answer your live chat, who know what's going on. And so it's really important because it's very easy to get the states to start coming after you if you don't understand kind of like what you're doing or what's going into the system. And I think this last bullet point is really around like, make sure you pick a partner that can grow with you, right? Like, so you might start really small. Like if folks out there are like really small SaaS businesses, you might maybe only have to remit Nexus in your home state or remit sales tax in your home state. But as you expand like your footprint, you add more remote employees, all of a sudden you've got to file in more states. You get into a complicated state like California or Louisiana, where you have like separate parish taxes and all these things like that. As that gets more complex, make sure you pick a partner that's going to like scale and keep that really simple for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. Nailed it. I think we've already learned a ton. I mean, I've got a bunch of notes already. We've already have a handful of questions from folks as well, which is great. Let's try to keep this one just like a minute each, and then we'll get into the Q&A to make time for that. But before we did that, we wanted to have some fun and do kind of like a rapid fire, have each of the experts share one piece of advice that they wish every SaaS operator knew earlier. Maybe Lydia, if you want to go first, would love to hear your thoughts here.
Yes, so I would say there is a price in waiting. The biggest, if I look at we acquired 3 companies, I said in 2020, and 2 companies in 2025, and the ones waited paid. So paid in compliance cost with the states, paid in when they sold the companies and the sellers punished them. So, unfavorable way by putting aside money that would have gone to the shareholders. So, and in thinking through that, I say why, sometimes I do think, back when I was in a startup company, I also waited. And why did I wait? I was trying to learn some lessons to teach myself and going forward on. So sure, in ChargeBee, because we have our product and we have great partners like TaxCloud and GoCardless, where we know the benefit of doing it quick and early, be our own customer as the first customer. So those pain I did not have to relive again, but I thought of, why I was living with those pains, because one, I was not prioritizing that. 2, that's 15 years ago. We didn't have good niche tools like we do today, where you're talking about, oh my gosh, now I gotta go, implement something like Oracle, like big hairy systems that would take many months, if not years. Good thing is technology has evolved to today, where these tools are very easy to implement, very quick to use, and the benefit versus cost is complete flop. Because back then, when I thought about solving those pains automatically, I was thinking, how many years of pain do I need to put in an implementation tool? You're looking at the combination of systems here, all in one, quite quick and easy implementation to solve the pain. So for me, the cost versus benefit equation completely flipped to a point of like, there's more cost to wait, there's less cost to act now.
Yeah, that's a great one. Michael, maybe you want to go next?
Yeah, I kind of hinted at it before, but when you looked at that Lydia's slide, it had the kind of the flywheel of all the different moving parts. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of payment providers. There's tons of options for tax, for billing, for CRMs, for accounting software, ERPs, etc. The one thing I would say is pick something that doesn't have those different platforms in silos. You want to have not only from a technical perspective, integrations that speak across the different platforms, but also from a relationship perspective. You want to be working with companies that they know each other, they get on with each other, and they have the best interest of the customer top of mind. So that if something does come up, they're not just passing the buck to the other person, they're working on it together to come to a solution. So pick an ecosystem of platforms that plays nicely together as you look to grow and scale.
Awesome. Hopefully that's a sign too from everyone listening today between even these three partners working so well together, just as a quick plug there as well. But before we wrap up, Joe, I'll call on you for your piece of advice.
Sure. I would say it's like, so look at your business and figure out what is like the core value or the core things that you do for your customers. Relentlessly focus on those and then outsource everything else to other software vendors. And so I was a startup founder, founded a company like 10, 12 years ago. And I know how easy it is to get distracted, right, by different things. And it's like when I talk to new founders and stuff, I'm like, no. Figure out like what are like the one or two or three things that like really deliver for your customers. Like relentlessly focus on it, iterate, figure out your product market fit, make sure you got everything there. And all these other things, like don't not do them. Just outsource is so easy, like Lydia said these days. Like just outsource them to software. So like, and I come all the way back around to like all my examples here of when I got to Tax Cloud. It's like we actually had a conversation where we're like, is billing our customer a core value that we deliver to our customers? And we're like, no, like we're like, it's all the tax stuff, right? Like, and so it was like, okay, and then we outsource that, right? Like we're not going to build our own system. Relentlessly focus on your core, outsource everything else.
Love it. Great lesson to end on. And we've got about 6 minutes for some Q&A. We actually have a good amount of questions. The first one here might be a mix, maybe for Joe or Lydia. We've got someone asking about either caching or batching strategies. They're talking about using another sales tax provider. Sounds like this might be kind of building up your tax bill potentially. So if that's you who chimed in, if you want to add any other details, I know Joe, if you'd want to call anything out around, tax cloud as an alternative, anything around pricing. To me, that question seems like kind of a question around ways to save, but I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on that.
Right. I know I saw this question when it popped up. I think that's a hard one to answer on a webinar. I think it depends. So it's kind of like, I think this would be a good one for us to circle back around and figure out more about what's going on, and decide what that batching is, because there are, I mean, we do, like at Tax Cloud, we have real live, integrations, which are delivering rates like real time as invoices and things are going out. And then we do have other batched ones where it's like, it doesn't really matter. The invoices that get batched up at night or whatever, and can get sales tax applied then. So it really just depends, to be honest.
Yep.
Which is a
good call.
terrible answer, but that's what I'm giving.
No, it's a good call. I think what we'll do is we'll send you an email with some qualifying questions too, just to kind of see if there's something we can help. Either way, we'll also loop in the ChargeBee team so that they can help with some guidance there as well. Let's see some other customers. So
I can take the second one. So currently using ChargeBee for invoicing and doing manual bank payment collections. I'm wondering if they can use us in Denmark and Spain. Short answer, yes. So Go Cardless and ChargeBee are integrated globally. We have 8 different currencies. We've been talking about ACH. We also cover, which is for the US. We also cover Canada, the Eurozone, which includes Spain, the UK and I, which would be BACS. Denmark and Sweden are also covered, so you can get the kronas pulled in, and then Australia, New Zealand. So yes, for Denmark and Spain, currently exists today. You would be able to automate that whole process. How to make it happen? I will type in my email address there. If you want to shoot me an email, I will let you know what the best way to move forward is.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. Awesome. Lydia, I think I've got one for you. Someone's asking about case studies or any resources. Sounds like they're a current ChargeBee user. Any recommendations on how to maximize the different use cases there? Yes. Yep,
Hey,
exactly.
Nikhil, I'm also gonna give you my email address. Feel free to reach out. Depending on whether you're talking about new sales, renewal sales, early sales, churn management, all the customer lifecycle activities that you can do with ChargeBee, depending on which types use cases that you want to maximize, I can connect you with the right people to showcase on each piece that how to use all the different features and functions in ChargeBee.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Lydia. There's one other one around, and this might be another technical one, so we'll kind of see. It might be you, Lydia. It was about customers sometimes making double payments, which sometimes leads to needing to give out refunds. Does that come up often on the ChargeBee side, or even GoCardless? I'd be curious if there's any recommendations there.
Well, Lydia, if you want to go first, it's probably specific to a different use case, but I have an answer potentially.
Yeah, so I don't see double payments in our automated payment flow, because if a customer logs into the system, if they already set up automatic payments, double payment will be very unusual, let's say through GoCardless. But in a manual pay environment, I can see that someone might get confused on something is already paid, but they forgot and they went and paid again. So I don't know your experience, Michael.
Yeah, I think in the invoicing for one-offs, similar to someone sending a check, they might send 2 checks. I think the solution would be to put someone on a recurring billing that would, to Lydia's point, prevent double payment from happening. And I know that you might think recurring is like the set thing, but you can do very flexible variable recurring so that you're not hooked into one specific type of payment for a specific amount of specific time. So I think from my perspective, depends on whether you're doing, it's a checkout or invoicing or what have you, but moving to a recurring model and then making sure you have flexibility in how you're collecting it. But ChargeBee does have built-in prevention of double payment. Again, that might be one where just shoot us an email and we can look into the specifics of it.
Awesome. I think one thing I'll call out too before we just wrap, because we're just at time, but I think even these questions are a great example of the nuances that can come with your billing, your payment, and your compliance. And just to kind of plus one Michael's point is all 3 of the teams here really want to talk to you, and we want to provide guidance. Even if you don't end up using our solutions, we'd love to chat and help you kind of solve some of these pains, right? And as you think about your 2026 strategy. So I know we weren't able to cover every single question, but again, I hope everyone that joined us live, anyone that's listening to this on demand, is walking with at least a couple of things to implement and consider in 2026. Before we wrap up, I want to just give one other big thank you to our expert speakers for taking the time and sharing their knowledge, for GoCardless and the ChargeBee teams for being a part of it. And then of course, everyone for listening in. So I think that's all we've got. Again, thank you everyone for the time.